All right, so we're on 4.1 first. You'll see like notes in the top. We're not going to review like all those words, but you'll see I wrote vector and then like brackets. When you write the component form of a vector, you put brackets, and then what goes in the first part? What goes in the first part of the bracket? Kind of. Horizontal, like shift. So you either go left or right. When do you go left? When it's negative. And then when do you go right? When it's positive. So the first one will be your horizontal shift. Similar to a coordinate, which would be your x, similar. And then in the right portion, you put your vertical. When do we go down? When that number is negative. And then you go up when it is positive. So that is a vector. That's a component form of a vector. Component form. To name a vector, when you name a vector, what does the symbol look like to name it? It's half of an arrow. All right, and then you write 2 points, under it, which we'll practice right here. We're going to name the vector and then write its component form. So let's first start with naming the vector. So to name it, you put that half arrow. What letter would come first here? M, and then N. And then to write in component form. So you want to go from M and end at N. So we want to go do the horizontal. We go to the right. How many spaces? 4. So is that a positive 4 or a negative 4? Positive. And then we go up. How many? 6. Is that a positive 6 or a negative 6? Positive. Beautiful. That's it. The second, we're going to name it. So you do like a half arrow. What letter will come first? B. So it starts at B and it ends at A. And then from B, horizontally, we go to the left. How many? 5. So is that positive 5 or negative? Negative 5. And then we go down 1, which is negative 1. All right, and then last, in component form, naming it first. What's the first letter we're going to write? K, and then J. And then in component form, do we go left or right? To the left, how many? So that would be negative 5. And then we go up 3, so that would be positive 3. Beautiful. So that's a vector. That's naming it and writing its component form. I believe there's 10 questions on the quiz. I know that is one of them, for sure. But we're still on the front page because we got to talk about writing a rule. Sorry, I wrote it on the front. So we're still on the front. Yeah. So it says write a rule. Just going to remind you how to do that. So a translation, to remind you, moves every point in the same distance in the same direction. So let's say you had point P. It would become P prime, right? That's what that apostrophe means. You would be adding or subtracting the same number to the x, and then adding or subtracting the same number to the y. What does it look like when we write a rule? What is the first thing we write down? XY. So we write down the coordinate with an arrow. This represents that every XY coordinate will have something happen to it. Then you write a set of parentheses with X and a Y. I left a blank because you normally write something here. If you write plus a number, what direction will you go? To the right. And if you write minus a number, you will go to the left. Whereas for the Y, if you write plus a number, you will go up. And if you write minus a number, you will go down. Perfect. So we're going to go back and forth from these vectors and rules on the back page. Graphing would be a lot for all 4 of these, so you're going to go ahead and cross out to graph it. We're not going to graph right now. So on this section, go ahead and cross out graphing. But we are going to translate it. So Some things to know. A translation is a shift. When it says translate, you go ahead and write this note. It means write the new coordinates, or write the shifted coordinates. Because sometimes I'm not even going to ask you to graph it. I'm just going to ask you what are the new coordinates. Just write them down. Just to save a little bit of time. Do you know the rule? Do you know how to do it? So this is using a vector. So that means we're going to use the original ABC. We're going to find A prime, B prime, and C prime. And we're going to use the vector to do that. So my vector is minus 4, 0. So what can I do to all the x's? Subtract 4. And then what am I going to do to all the y's? Yeah, keep them the same. Absolutely nothing. That's what 0 means. So 1 minus 4 is negative 3. And then 2 and 0. 2 plus 0 is nothing. So 2. So the y's will have absolutely nothing happen to them. But the x's we're going to subtract 4. So b prime, 5 minus 4 is 1. And then nothing's going to happen to the y. It will stay a 1. For c prime, 5 minus 4 is 1. And then 4, 4. That's it. We're going to skip down to number 7. Number 7, just to save on some time. We're still going to find a prime, b prime, and c prime of the original points. So what am I going to do to all the x's? Add 1, and all the y's I'm going to subtract 3. So a prime, 1 plus 1 is 2, and then 2 minus 3, negative 1. B prime, 5 plus 1 is 6. And then 1 minus 3, negative 2. And then c prime, 5 plus 1, 6. And then 4 minus 3, 1. So if on your quiz on Wednesday, it will, one of the questions says translate. All you do is you write the new points. You don't graph it. You just write them down and move on with your life. Questions about this one? Wonderful news. We're going to write a rule. So go ahead and start writing a rule with the xy with your arrow. All right, so which of these is the original? The solid one. How do I know other than the fact that it's solid? It doesn't have the prime. It doesn't have the apostrophe. So the apostrophe, this is always the new one, which we call the image. And then what do we call the original? Do you remember? It's a pre-image. Pre-image. All right, so pick a letter, P, S, R, or Q. P sounds good. You could do S as well. It's going to be the same. So we're going to count the X shift. We went to the right how many? 4, so that'd be plus 4. And then we went up 3, so that would be plus 3. Write a rule for the second. So again, your image is the new one. And then your pre-image is the old one. So pick a letter to compare. Q, sounds good. So to get from Q to Q prime, do we have to go left or right? To the right one, which would be plus 1. And then we have to go down 3, which would be negative 3. And minus 3. Good. The last thing we're going to do on this page, go ahead and correct. We're going to do a pre-image on the second one. It doesn't say pre-image, but we are going to do that. As we said earlier, there is a pre-image. Then what happens to the pre-image? The rule, and it becomes the image, right? So on this first one, it says J is 4, 5. So is that the pre-image or the image? pre-image. How do I know it's not the new image? Doesn't have the prime, right? The apostrophe. So we want to use the rule to find the image, which would be J prime. So what is my rule here? Plus 6 and minus 3, right? So we're going to do x plus 6. What is 4 plus 6? 10. And then 5 minus 3, 2. So J prime is 10, 2. For this one, this was a typo. How did I know this was the image? This was the newer one. Because again, of the apostrophe, right? R prime was 0, negative 5. So we want to find R, and we're going to use the rule to do it. So can I add 6 and subtract 3 to find the original? No. I'm going to have to do the opposite, because we're going in the opposite direction. Because something plus 6 made 0, right? So what plus 6 makes 0? Negative 6. So to go the opposite direction, you do the opposite. So 0 minus 6 makes negative 6. And then what minus 3 makes minus 5? Negative 2. Good. And again, you could always go the opposite direction and think in your head you add 3, you get negative 2. But that is your pre-image, which completes 4.1. Questions about this one? Okay, go to 4.2. So before we begin 4.2, go ahead and write a note at the top that you're always outline or highlight. We'll put outline. Always outline the line of reflection. When I looked at some of the 4.2s, some people did not outline the line of reflection. It is a part of like the points you get for the question. So make sure you're always outlining it. And then we're going to practice which ones are which. But go ahead and take your highlighter. When you want to reflect around the x-axis, I know it says A and negative B. If you don't like that, that means the x stays the same and the y is the opposite sign. So to reflect around the x-axis, you keep the x and then you flip the y, like you change the sign of the y. So for the y-axis, the x will be the opposite sign and the y will stay the same. Those two you can memorize if you want. You could also just eyeball it and count. The ones that are harder to count would be the y equals x and the y equals negative x. So for this one, I would recommend remembering that you flip the x and the y. An easy way to remember that is when you see y equals x, y is the first letter you see and x is the second letter you see. And then last, when y equals negative x, what do we do with them? We not only flip them, but we do the opposite sign, right? We negate them. Good. And then the last thing we're going to review is how to graph the lines. Go ahead and draw like 4 x and y axes, or 4 graphs, if you will. They don't have to be perfect. One, two, 3, 4. So in that little blank section, just so. So let's say for the first we wanted to graph y equals 2. Go and write down y equals 2. Then you can pick up your highlighter. Which axis does y equals 2 touch? The y-axis at 2, right? So if it touches at 2, this would be about 2 on the y-axis. What kind of line will it look like? Horizontal. So it would be a horizontal line through the number 2 on the y-axis. If we wanted to do x equals 2, which axis does it touch? The x-axis at 2. So So what kind of line would this one look like? Vertical. The next one is y equals x. You can remember this a couple of ways. If y equals x, that means literally y equals x. If x is -1, that means y equals x, and y would also be -1, and 0, 0, and 1, 1, and 2, 2, and so on and so forth. You can also remember what kind of slope does it have? What number is invisibly in front of the x? A 1. So you go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1 from the origin. So it looks, roughly like this. Obviously, you would have the boxes there. Then last, I don't have room at the top. Y equals -x is this last one. Y equals -x. It will just be the flipped, the reverse. Sorry if there's a lot of blue happening over here. That's it. We're going to practice 2 at the bottom and then 2 on the back. Ready? So we're going to do number 1 first. We're going to reflect around the y-axis. Go ahead and highlight the y-axis. So you always want to mark what the line of reflection is. For here, it is the y-axis. So we're going to graph all the points. One of them does go off the graph. I'm sorry. This came with your book, so I can't help that. But one of them does. -1 up 5 is A, so just do your best. B is -4 is 4, so to the left 4, up 1, 2, 3, 4. And then C is -3, up 1. All right, so you can do one of 2 things. To reflect around the y-axis, you can remember the rule, which is where you do the opposite x and then the y stays the same. So what would A prime be if A was -1, 5? The x will be the opposite, the y will stay the same. 1, 5. To the right 1, up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can do that. You memorize it. It's fine. Or you can count. How far away was A from the y-axis? It was 1 to the left, right? So then A prime would be 1 to the right. B prime is how many away from the y-axis? It's 4 to the left, so B prime will be 4 to the right. C prime is 1, 2, 3 to the left. So C prime will be 3 to the right. Connect the dots. Ta-da! Isn't it beautiful? Are we okay with the y-axis? Go ahead. You have to outline whatever the line of reflection is. Here it happened to be the y-axis. Yeah. Sometimes it'll be a number. We're going to skip number 2 for now and do number 3. So you want to outline what y equals 1 is on your paper. Number 1, it helps you anyways. But number 2, it's just a part of the points that you would get on your quiz or test. So y equals 1. Which axis do I touch? The y-axis. And at 1. So it is going to look like what kind of line? Horizontal. I know you want to make it vertical, but it's not going to be vertical. It will be horizontal. Like that. Okay. Oop, that's ugly. All right, we're going to graph our points. So we got A is 2, -1. B is -4, -2. And then C is -1, -3. Connect the dots. We got a beautiful. So you highlighted the y-axis, but this is y equals 1. So you only highlight what you're flipping over. Yeah. All right, so we're just going to use our eyes. So there's a top and a bottom, right? Right now we have a triangle on the bottom, so we want a triangle reflected on the top. So how far is A from the mirror, the line of reflection? 2 down, so A prime will be 2 up. C prime is how many down? 4 down from the mirror, so we're going to go 4 up. We are going to go off the graph. That's okay. Oops, that's a C. And then B prime is down 2, 3, so B prime will be up 1, 2, 3. I drew that beautifully, but there you go. Questions, comments, concerns? Okay, we're on the back. We'll come back to those two a different day. So we're going to graph the polygon's image after reflection. So let's go ahead and graph the line of reflection. So it means from 0, 0, the slope is 1. So up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. You go the opposite, down 1 to left 1, down 1 to left 1. It'll look like this. Go ahead and draw your line of reflection. We have this problem and one more, and then we are going to play Book It. Just so you know. All right, so whenever you reflect around y equals x, I personally believe that it is easier just to use the rule. What will happen to all the x's and y's? They'll flip. I just think it's easier. You don't really have to think about much. You just do it. So let's talk about B. It's just the easiest one to do from the origin. What is the coordinate of B? -1, 2. So if B is -1, 2, then B prime will be 2, -1. So to the left, up to the right 2, and down 1. And then make sure you label it B prime. Do you want to do C next? Realistically, you only need to do 3 of them, and the 4th one you can guess, right? I mean, not that super hard. What is the coordinate point for C? -1, 4. So if C was -1, 4, then C prime will be 4, -1. So over 4, down 1. Most people can figure out, they're going to be congruent, right? It's the same picture reflected. So you know it's a 2 by 2 square, but you need to be able to label these points correctly. So we could do A. What is the coordinate point of A? -3, 2. So if A is -3, 2, what will A prime be? 2, -3. So over 2, down 3. So here's A prime, which means the one that's left is D prime. Do they look like they're reflected? If I folded it in half at y equals x, would they lay on top of each other? Yes. Beautiful. Question about this one? Okay. We'll do the number 6 before our quiz, but not today. We're going to do number 7 and then be done. So we're going to graph a triangle, and then we're going to translate it, and then reflect it. So how many triangles are we going to have? 3. So we're going to go ahead and graph the first one. However, something to note, what does it look like the axis is doing on these graphs? Counting by 2s, which is going to add a little bit of a level of difficulty, but it'll be in our favor. I'll show you why. Let's go ahead and graph the original first. So you always graph the original. So we got 3, 1. So remember, we're counting by 2s. So one whole box is 2. So if this is 2 and this is 4, halfway between it is 3. And then up 1, it'll be about here. I know it looks super weird. Let me get a smaller pen. There we go. K is 4, 2. So over 4, up 2. 2, 4, up 2. Here's K. and then L is 1, 3. So remember, 1 is halfway between 0 and 2, and then 3 will be 2, 3. Go ahead and connect the dots. Are we okay with our original? Okay. So now we're going to translate, which means to shift. Okay? So we're going to translate them. Normally you could count, right? What would we count if it was x minus 1 and x minus 6 and y minus 1? What would we do? What direction would we go? We'd go left and then down. I would say the counting by twos adds a level of difficulty. It's in our favor if we write down these points because we're going to reflect them afterwards. So we're going to write down the J prime, K prime, and L prime because we're going to reflect these points eventually. So all of these x's, we're going to subtract 6 like the rule says, and all the y's will be we'll subtract 1 like the rule says. So minus 6, minus 1 to all of them. So J prime, what is 3 minus 6? Negative 3. And then 1 minus 1, 0. 4 minus 6, negative 2. And then 2 minus 1. Oh, it is 1. Sorry, guys, it was a long break. 1 minus 6, negative 5. And then 3 minus 1, 2. So we're going to go ahead and graph those. Negative 3, so that's negative 2, negative 3, 0. It's going to be right here. Make sure you label it J prime with an apostrophe. K prime is negative 2, 1, so negative 2 up 1. And L is negative 5, so 2, 4, negative 5 up 2. Connect the dots. Are we all okay with the second triangle? Okay. We are going to reflect it. Let's go ahead and draw the graph. Y equals negative x means you have a slope of negative 1. It also means whatever x is, y is the opposite sign. Whatever y is, x is the opposite sign. So that means like negative 1. If x is negative 1, y is positive 1. Then you'd have 0, 0. If x was 1, y would be negative 1. If x was 2, y would be negative 2. That's what that means. So go ahead and draw y equals negative x. Then we're going to reflect. You're right. Told you it was a long break. Negative x is when you go left to right, you're going downhill. All right, so J double prime. What is the rule? What are we going to do to all of our x's and y's when y equals negative x? You flip them and you switch the sign, right? So flip them and switch the sign. So this is where a lot of people went wrong on the practice worksheet. They reflected the original. You're not reflecting the original. You're reflecting the translated. So my blue will be flipped, okay? So when we reflect, we're reflecting J prime. So you're going to flip them and do the opposite sign. So what will J prime be? 0, 3. So over 0, up 3. There will be your J double prime. K double prime, you're going to flip them and the opposite sign. So K double prime will be negative 1, 2. There's going to be a lot in a little space. Okay? And then L double prime, flip them and do the opposite sign. So L double prime will be negative 2, 5. Negative 2, up 2, 4, 5. Connect the dots. The only additional thing you'll be asked on your quiz is to highlight them. So you'll be asked, I think, to highlight 2 of them. Something like that. We're going to practice a different day. We're going to do a booklet.